I'm going to do breaking down food, and it follows on from digesting food. In digesting food, we found out why we need to break large insoluble food molecules down into small soluble ones so that they can pass through the intestine wall into the blood and dissolve in the blood and then be transported around to all parts of our body that need them. And now we're going to do how these large food molecules are actually broken down in the body. Now, how they're broken down are by things called enzymes. Now, there's different enzymes that break different types of food molecules down, and you need to know about 3. So, you need to know about the enzymes that break down carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Okay, you need to know what they're broken down from, so carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, and what they're broken down into, and which enzymes do that. It's quite easy, really, but it's a list of things to remember. So, here goes. Okay, so first of all, carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are found in foods such as pasta, rice, bread, and wheat, and everything cereal-like contains carbohydrates. And an example of carbohydrates is starch. Now, carbohydrates are broken down by the enzyme called carbohydrates. Now, all enzymes actually end in A's, so it's actually quite easy to remember them. Carbohydrates broken down by the enzymes carbohydrates. Okay, and they're broken down to make glucose, which is that sugar. Now, the easy way to remember this is, have you ever tried chewing bread for a really long time? Then you should try it. What happens is you start tasting bread at first, and then as you chew and you chew and you chew, and I'm talking about make it quite mushy, okay, and then it will start to taste sweet. And the reason for that is that you have a carbohydrates enzyme in your saliva, in your spit, called amylase, that breaks down your carbohydrate in your bread, the starch in your bread, into glucose molecules. And glucose is, of course, a sugar, and so it's sweet. That's why you suddenly start tasting sweet taste after you've chewed your bread for a really long time. Okay, another amylase, which is another carbohydrate, it's also released by your pancreas into your small intestine. Okay, that's what you need to know about carbohydrates and their enzymes. Okay, so the next food group is proteins. And remember what I said before about enzymes sounding like the food that they break up? Okay, so the enzymes for proteins are known as proteases. Okay, and an example of a protease is pepsin. Pepsin is found in the stomach, it's released by the stomach, and it actually works best at an optimum acidic pH of 2 to 3, so it works fastest at that pH. And for that to be the pH in the stomach walls release hydrochloric acid into the stomach. But then there's also another protease that works in the small intestine, but the small intestine has a pH of 8, which is actually alkaline, so these proteases work best in alkaline conditions. And proteins are when proteases break down the proteins, they break them down into amino acids, because as you know, proteins are just very, very long chains of amino acids. So when they're broken down by the proteases, they become the amino acids once again. Okay, so the final food group is lipids, which is just another name for fats. And if you remember what I said about the enzymes sounding like the food they're breaking up, so lipids are broken up by lipase enzymes. Okay, and the lipase enzymes break lipids and fats down into 2 things, which are called glycerol and fatty acids. And that you need to remember, glycerol and fatty acids. Okay. Now, breaking down fats is a little bit more complicated than just using enzymes. There's a little bit more that you need to know. If you've ever tried mixing oil and water together in a glass, if you haven't tried it, you should try it. You will see that they don't mix very well at all. In fact, they separate out and they make layers. So when you eat something fatty, what happens is the lumps of fat go and sit in your stomach and they don't mix with all the water and watery liquids in your stomach. And this makes it very difficult for the lipase to break them down, because when you have a lump like this of fat, it has a very small surface area. The lipase enzyme can only work on the outside of the lump, so breaking down this fat lump takes a really long time. So what needs to happen is that this lump of fat needs to be broken down into tiny little droplets to increase the surface area of the fat. And that is done by something called bile, which is released from the gallbladder, and it is known as an emulsifier, because something that breaks down fats and helps it to mix with water is known as an emulsifier. So bile is released from your gallbladder and it breaks down the fats in your stomach as an emulsifier, and so tiny little droplets of fat then have a much larger surface area, because the lipase enzyme can then work on each little drop on its own and break down the fat much quicker into those fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, so the other thing that bile does is that it is slightly alkaline. So when it's released into the small intestine, it gives the small intestine an alkaline pH, and this helps the protease enzymes in the small intestine work better as well. Now, the final slightly not very nice thing that bile does is that it turns your poo brown. Okay, bile is the thing that makes feces brown. Okay, and on that note, breaking down food molecules is finished.